and less like an ape, more like a, the opposite of an ape. Hey guys, Lewis from Recycle Bicycle Sales here. Today we wanted to do a video talking about how to find the correct bike size for you. Now, a quick disclaimer that this isn't about doing a bike fit. This is just making sure that you get the right size frame for your height. So why is buying the correct frame size so important? Well, I suppose a couple of quick things that come to mind when I think of that is having the incorrect frame size could mean that you fit on the bike incorrectly. If you perhaps rode a bike that was too small for you, you might be sort of hunched over like a prawn while you're riding. Or if you're on a frame that's too big for you, you might feel like you're sort of stretching out the whole time and you're using different muscles that you usually wouldn't use when you're riding your bike. You could also say that it can also be very uncomfortable riding the wrong size bike. And at the end of the day, having the correct size could be the difference between falling in love with cycling and not falling in love with cycling. The first step is to have a look on the manufacturer's website. They'll usually have a size guide just like this one, which will give you a bit of an indication for what height range fits on what frame size. This is a great first rule of thumb to give you an idea as to whether you should be looking at that size frame or this size frame. Not all manufacturers have this, and sometimes they're not completely accurate. So what I say is use it as a size guide, don't follow it like the Bible. There's a couple of other ways that we can work out what frame size we need. A really interesting one that we found recently is by measuring your inseam, so the inside of your leg, putting it into a little calculation, timesing it by a certain little number, and then that gives you a rough idea of how long the top tube of your bike should be. This is important because most road bike sizing is measured as the length of the top tube, meaning from the center of this bearing here to the center of the seat tube there. So that sort of top tube length there. To measure the inseam, one way that we recommend doing it is grabbing some sort of flat thing like a book, or I've got a little whiteboard here, and putting it between your legs and holding it up sort of as high as it can go. And then if we can try and hold it really central, and we'll step away from the wall, try and grab it so it doesn't move anywhere. And I can see that mine goes all the way up to there. So I'll grab my tape measure and I'll measure to the top there, which I would be saying is 920 mil. Now we take this number, which was 920 millimeters, and we're going to times that by 0.67. And that's going to give us roughly in millimeters what our top tube should be. This one here is telling me that it's a 61 centimeter top tube that I should be riding. That's like saying a double XL. I actually ride a 58 centimeter. I have relatively long legs compared to the rest of my body. I think I used to do different athletics as a kid, and that's what they always told me, that I had long legs and a shorter sort of torso. I'm less like an ape, more like a, the opposite of an ape. So it says that I should be using a 61 centimeter top tube, but I actually happen to use a 58 centimeter. So again, it's a guide, it's not the Bible. Let us know in the comments below, did you find this calculation to be accurate for you? After you've done your calculation, you should have a pretty rough guide as to what size frame you'll need. However, I absolutely recommend going to the local bike shop and test riding a few sizes. This one here, just by looking at it next to me, I think it looks a little bit too small, but nonetheless, we're gonna sit on it and have a closer look so we can get an idea of some of the leading indicators that the frame is the wrong size for you. One of the really obvious ones that I would say is, if you're standing over the bike, if you can lift it really far off the ground, it probably means that it's a little bit too small. You should have about 2.5 centimeters of room between, I suppose, your body and the top tube of the bike, which I think in American numbers works out as being about 1 inch. So as we can see with this one here, it's lifting like 10 centimeters, which is way too small for me. So this bike, I can already clearly tell is way too small for me. The next leading indicator could be that if you're sitting on the seat, I mean, on this one, I'm flat foot and sort of knees a little bit bent. That's way too low for me. On a racing bike with these drop down handlebars, when we're sitting on the seat, usually you'll be tippy toes. Sometimes you might only just be able to touch the floor. It might be all the way up the top, because it's more important about having the right seat height when you're actually pedaling, not when you're standing at the traffic lights. So the distance to the floor kind of doesn't really matter. It's more about the distance to where your pedal would be. So we can see on this one here that the seat would need to come up heaps. Now, on this frame here, I can also see that the seat post can't really come any higher. It might be able to come you know, a centimetre maybe, but I think I'd need to come up at least 6, 7 or 8 centimetres from there. So this frame would not allow the seat to come up to the height that I would need it to be. That means that it's definitely the wrong frame size for me. On the flip side of that, if you're riding a bike that's perhaps too big for you and the seat's all the way down and it's only just above the top tube down here, and you can't go any lower, that also means that it's probably the wrong frame size for you. You'd need to go down a size. If you're looking for more information about how to set your seat height, we actually had a really well-received video further back on our YouTube channel, so definitely check that one out if you want more information about how to adjust your seat height properly. Now, one question that I always get is when people test ride a bike around the car park, that they might steer and the tire might touch their shoe. That's not always a bad thing. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the wrong frame size. It might just be the way that you're riding around the car park. When you're riding around the car park, you're usually going really slow. You're not speeding down the road and chucking it into a corner. So you're able to steer really far. When you're out on the road, you couldn't steer the handlebars much, I mean, really much at all. It's kind of more about leaning the bike to be able to steer. So it might feel like an issue on your first little test ride, but just think about how your foot is. It's definitely something worth thinking about, but just because your shoe is touching the tire, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the wrong frame size. My shoe still rubs on my tire. If the frame size is too small and you've had the seat all the way up to about where you need it to be, you might find that your hands are so low down because the distance from the seat down to the handlebar is so far. You might feel a lot of weight on your hands while you're riding and it can become a little bit uncomfortable. So that could be another sort of telltale sign that you're leaning down on the front wheel and you're maybe you're using a little bit more tricep than you normally would if it was the right frame size. On the flip side, if you're riding a frame size that's too big, you might feel like the distance of the top tube and the stem is really long, so your hands are all the way out here and you're stretching so much, or it could even feel like they're really high and you're sort of riding your racing bike up like a sail rather than being down like an sort of aerodynamic racer. You've always got a little bit of adjustment around the handlebar, around raising it or moving it further out, but I only say just a little bit because it really is just that, a little bit. Honestly, you should know if you're on the right size bike. If you've ridden the wrong size bike, it'll feel uncomfortable, but if you get on the right size bike, you should be able to tell pretty quickly because it will just feel nice and comfortable. Even if you're going around the car park, doing some, you know, nice little zigzags, you don't feel like, oh, I'm trying to keep my balance or anything like that. You should just feel nice and comfortable and relaxed, sort of, you know, you can kind of drop your shoulders a little bit. You feel at one with the bike, I suppose. And a quick little side note, as someone that's had over 25 different bikes, I know exactly how new bike day can feel. And sometimes you get so excited in the moment and you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, it's pink and my dream color is pink and I have to have that bike. But check the frame size. Don't get too caught up in that. If it's the wrong frame size and you still bought the bike, this could lead to a domino effect of other problems. You could become uncomfortable. You might have to try and sell the bike later at a loss. There could be this sort of long domino effect. So I know that new bike day is exciting, but use your head, get the bike that's gonna be nice and comfortable, because at the end of the day, you're going to spend hours and hours and hours riding this bike sitting on that little saddle. Just before we close off this video, I also wanted to say that in this video, we've been talking about how to get the correct frame size. Now, getting the correct frame size for these professional athletes who are all about, you know, saving time in their racing and all that sort of racing stuff, you might appreciate a proper bike fit. You can get a proper bike fit. There's probably a few different people in your city that offer one. I think here in Australia, it's usually about $250 to $300. So it's a bit of a costly exercise, but you'll be sitting down with a professional bike fitter and they'll sit down with you and they'll have a laser beam, tiny little tape measures, you know, little rulers, and they'll try different stems and they'll try different things right until they get it down to perfect for you. This video is more about just getting the correct frame size. If you want it to be perfect, you might appreciate a bike fit. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you've learned about how to find the correct frame size for you. We spoke about how to measure your inseam and work out the top tube as one idea. We spoke about a size guide as another idea. I would just say, try a few different things, try a few different bikes, and then hopefully you'll know exactly when you found the right bike. Otherwise, I'm gonna say, thanks for watching this video and we'll see you in the next one. See you guys.